I'm Harv Nagra. I'm an operations consultant, a former in house agency operations director, and head of brand communications at Scoro. Welcome to The Handbook, the Agency Operations Podcast, a space where we talk to fellow experts and operations leaders about agency life, discussing the challenges keeping us up at night, as well as strategies that help make things run a little bit smoother. Welcome back to the show. The topic of today's episode is one that I really believe in because I've seen the benefits this can have firsthand at my past agency and at other workplaces. It's the consolidation of tools. In the previous episode, we were speaking about the key areas to optimize to grow your agency. In a bit of an abstract way, we're building on that theme today. A couple of weeks ago, I gave a short presentation at the Agency Hackers State of the Nation webinar. In the presentation, I was talking about how eye opening it was when one of my past bosses, the COO of an agency I worked at, showed me a business maturity model and asked me to assess where I thought our agency sat. It helped me get a quick snapshot of where we were and where we might want to go. The maturity model I was referencing in my presentation was the Service Maturity Levels by SPI Research, but there's other similar models out there as well. They have slightly different terminology, but they tend to have 5 stages. And for service-based businesses like agencies, they focus on process and tool maturity. So, in the first stage, you're in the early steps of launching your business, you're finding your footing, and of course, your focus is mostly on winning business. Things tend to be very ad hoc, and you kind of make things up as you go. We've all been there. You'll be using a variety of tools and spreadsheets and don't have much visibility on your projects, let alone business performance overall. In the second stage, you might have pockets of best practice in certain departments, but certainly not across the agency. Your tools still tend to require a lot of manual data replication from one system or spreadsheet to the next. I won't be going into each of the next stages in detail in this episode intro. Feel free to check out that agency hackers presentation I mentioned. We'll put a link to it in the episode notes. But quickly, stages 3 to 5 are where you have documented best practice. You bring in best of breed tools that consolidate more of the workflow and which integrate really well with other best in class standalone tools natively. We'll be talking about some of those benefits in today's episode. Now, don't get me wrong, I love experimenting with new tools, and it's essential for us to try things out and stay on top of innovations that can transform the way we work for the better. But for your core workflow, I think there definitely comes a point, likely multiple times over the years, that you grow and evolve and where you outgrow the sets of tools that were good enough in the past, and you start finding that they're hindering your efficiency and potential going forward. I've been there myself. There was a time in the past, before I was ops director, mind you, where we were copying and pasting each other's quotes in Harvest. I cringe at that memory now. Scheduling was being done in Google Sheets, which had absolutely no connection or link to project budgets or how much time had already been worked. And in fact, time logging was very sporadic and was only done by a handful of employees. Next, there was basically manual reconciliation of what needed to be invoiced, what was invoiced, and what had been paid. And what's worse, we did have multiple entities in different countries. And this meant that we had 4 separate Harvest accounts with separate users in each. Imagine trying to remember which account to log into to run your project or log your time in. It just didn't happen. Hopefully, that tangled mess doesn't sound too familiar to any of you. Anyway, at a certain stage, perhaps in your early years, it's fine to be running a bit ad hoc and all over the place like this. Like I said, your focus is on winning business. But there does come a point in your agency's growth where you start recognizing that having data mostly siloed across multiple tools and having to manually move or analyze information becomes a bottleneck to your productivity. And I know this is a long intro, but I think another point is that there's 2 ends of the spectrum here as well. On one end, you've got these isolated tools and spreadsheets. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got these complicated enterprise systems that look like they were designed in the 80s. All of this is to say that in today's episode, we're going to explore some of these challenges and benefits around consolidation. But before we dive in, I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Tyler Caskey. Tyler is a chartered accountant and an experienced CFO and accounting partner. He's based in Australia, and in 2021, he founded TheBeanCounters, an accounting consultancy which helps businesses with system scoping and implementation. The bean counters really aim to understand a business's challenges and offer a tailored solution. Tyler is passionate about process automation and has focused his career and the bean counters on designing operating models that can save time and money. Tyler's clients cover a broad range of industries, which include agencies and consultancies. So let's jump into the discussion. Tyler, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Harv. Great to be here.
Let's start with you telling us a bit about yourself in your own words. What's your background and what do you do?
Appreciate it. I'm a chartered accountant by trade, but for the last 4 years, I've been working in consultancy, specifically system consultancy, helping businesses take the risk out of change. My background, I started work in New Zealand at the Big Four Consulting at KPMG. I've done about 12 years working in industry as a commercial manager or financial controller and a CFO before coming back
Okay.
into consulting.
So, in terms of the bean counters, what kinds of problems do you help your customers solve?
Yeah, we go across the board. Our main skill sets will be in professional services. So we've helped a lot of people, businesses, set up job tracking systems, billing systems, CRMs, but we've also done a lot of finance and payroll as well.
Okay.
And our real skill set is in trying to find the most well integrated systems in the market that suit them as a business. So, making sure that, they are using, I suppose, best of breed technology that suits them at the right price point as well.
Excellent. So, yeah, as I said at the top of the episode, the convo today with Tyler is around the consolidation of tools. But, Tyler, before we get into it, I was keen to hear what kinds of problems your customers are having when they're seeking out your services. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, the first one I would say is around data transparency. So
Hmm.
whenever we get a new client, I was talking with one of the founders of one of our marketing or agency businesses last year, and he just didn't have enough around what his team was doing, when, what jobs they were working on, what tasks they were doing, how long those took. And so I
Hmm.
found a lot of the systems track data, like they receive data well, but like to look
Yeah.
at it from a visual point, in a graphical way or a report way, there wasn't a lot of skills in the system he was using. And then the next one I found was there's a quite an interesting gap in the market between like country central specific systems
Mm.
and global systems. And so that pain point was around countries that had different job tracking systems, different metrics, different reporting, and that I find is really hard. Especially if you're talking multi-currency, multi-language.
Mm.
So that's probably one of the big pain points. And
Yeah.
then the third one for me is like ease of use. I always look at how easy is it to put in a timesheet. Like, can you do
Hmm.
it on your phone in the Uber from your office to from the client's office to yours? And I
Yeah.
think that one is become a really high expectation of how strong is your app and how easy is it to use and how intuitive is that function.
Hmm. So, it's not unusual for businesses to find themselves using multiple tools for various tasks. In a way, this is great. There's a lot of cool tech out there. Every month we see new kind of niche products come out that solve very specific problems. But I guess the question is, do you think this is a problem? Or maybe the question is, when does this become a problem?
Yeah. I think when there are multiple sources of data is when it
Mm.
becomes really challenging. Integration and automatic two-way integration is really the market leading position at the moment. I've found, if you've got two best of breed systems, like a CRM that doesn't talk to your job system, you're going to lose staff because they're manually transitioning data and everyone's got
Mm.
like their own time value curves,
Yeah.
and you've just got these moments where you just feel like your time's being wasted. So
Mm.
I always look for systems that natively integrate or integrate without human touch. I like that not only for like making my staff happier, it also
Yeah.
benefits the business because, people are more productive. That means they can get on to either revenue generating activities or other high value activities, especially if you're like a finance team or a marketing team. You don't want to be like transitioning leads from system A to B. But
Mm-hmm.
the big one a lot of people miss is data errors. So
Mm.
coming from a finance background,
Yeah.
like billing a client with the wrong company name is the fastest way to annoy any client,
Yeah.
like send it with the wrong address, the wrong client name. So I always kind of think the more single source of truth with multiple people having the ability to ensure that data is accurate really creates a good experience for the business. But then also when you're dealing with the outer world, you're less
Yeah.
likely to have errors and just really make people slightly annoyed or not enjoy dealing with you as a business.
Exactly, exactly that. And I think the point you brought up about kind of wasting your own team's time is so valid. This is work they could be focusing on delivering client work or winning new business, and instead they can end up just wasting time on these kind of siloed sets of data and moving that around or clunky, difficult to use tools. I was working with a client last year, and the situation was like they were quoting in spreadsheets, tracking sales in a separate CRM that was not connected. They were scheduling somewhere else, tracking time somewhere else. Invoicing was done completely manually in the sense that people had to tell the finance director when to invoice things. So there was literally no automation there. You can just imagine the amount of time that gets invested replicating that data from one system to the next to be able to get that project to flow from start to finish.
Absolutely. And like that error chance, like
Oh, yeah.
is so high. Like I know for a lot of agencies, the one I work with, we either bill time and materials or we bill a recurring fee, or
Yeah.
sometimes we bill based on milestone as the website is created.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first got into this business, they had some pretty good tech going on, but we were still
Yeah.
using spreadsheets to create the billing. And
Mm-hmm.
if you typed in the wrong number or didn't drag down the formula, the percentage complete or percentage of job just wasn't calculating properly. And so I
Yeah.
always think like removing those chances where Excel can help you make an error is just,
Yeah.
it's almost like a no brainer for me. Cause I always find, especially if I make a billing error, and like everyone's done it, like I've made billing errors in my last 25 years of work. It's, it's embarrassing, but B, it's always a
Mm.
waste of time because the client picks it up and then they lose a little bit of trust. And they're
Yeah.
like, you might underbill, you might overbill. And
Mm.
it's just not the look I really like to have.
Yeah. And on that note of spreadsheets as well, you spend so much time manipulating data and getting it in those spreadsheets. And by the time you sit down to actually analyze it, they're out of date. You might have prepared that a week ago, and by then things have moved on. So it's just not a very productive use of time, even that.
Yeah.
That being said, there's always going to be a spreadsheet. That's just the nature of things, and always multiple tools as well. What's the right balance, do you think, about having multiple tools versus consolidation? Do you have any kind of rules of thumb?
Yeah, I do. I do. This is a question we get asked a lot in our scoping projects because, for some of our clients, they're like, we know what we want to do. We want to move
Hmm.
to zero. Please help us. Right. So we're like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Like I do a quick scoping session. Are you this? Are you this? How many transactions do you have per month? Okay, you fit. Let's move. Other
Right.
times we'll do with full discovery for larger businesses to make sure that they actually fit.
Hmm.
And I've found best of breed technology for me is winning at the moment. And
Mm.
again, kind of thinking about the iPhone, people are really comfortable now with using like a base product plus apps, and
Hmm.
it's very intuitive to us. And we've done some studies on it in our past, and the average business user or business operator will be using between 7 and 10 apps per day on their laptop.
Right.
It's quite
Hmm.
interesting. And so what I like natively integrated systems. And then what I find is the places that have good best of breed technology, not only are they accurate, they're
Yeah.
well integrated, but they're also like very intuitive and easy to use. And what that does for me is it makes my new staff onboarding process a lot faster. I
Mm.
don't have to make 50-page how-to documents, because people will leave unintuitive systems super
Mm.
fast. Like, if a job's not called a job or a project if a client's not called a client or a company or a trust or
Oh
whatever
yeah.
it is, they're just like, this doesn't make sense. I'm changing. So there's some
Mm,
really, the market is driving best of breed technology to go
yeah.
to a higher standard fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there using systems myself, which kind of do everything you need it to do, but it's just hideous and painful to use. And you can sense the kind of reluctance of people. And it kind of just brings a feeling of doom to the environment. Like it's just frustration, right? It's like, oh God, I'm spending all day looking at this very clunky system. So we're going to get into system scoping and implementation in a moment, just to talk about how you go about that. But before we get into that, the benefits of consolidating a system. I think we've talked about some of that stuff, right? There's the accuracy element, getting visibility on your actual business metrics now rather than looking at these dated spreadsheets and stuff like that. Anything else come to mind for you that kind of is a huge benefit of consolidating rather than using a dozen different tools?
Yeah, for me, I'm a really big fan of like good reporting and like having everyone in the same system using the system. I think of my time in design, and I had a job system that had CRM built in. And I
Yeah.
remember my CEO came up to me and he was like, "Tyler, like I don't have to chase my product leads anymore to do their lead entry." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Because they're in the system doing their timesheets all day now. So
Mm-hmm.
like they also know that we're going to have a monthly meeting. Or sorry, it was a weekly meeting actually on leads. And
Yeah.
so the CEO had like good lead data because they weren't transitioning. It wasn't even on Salesforce. I think it was like a manual data entry, like a Microsoft Dynamics add-in or something. So they had
Okay.
to go out of one system into the other. So like, having like built-in data that everyone uses is awesome. And then if you really want to like, add like an amazing sales pipeline to it, like you could obviously add in, the additions like Salesforce and HubSpot and all that. But, I think the more you can get people using their main systems for as much as you can, just making sure it doesn't, you're not using a black box technology, I think is the way to
Mm-hmm.
go. And it makes people a bit happier in their day to day life and they feel a bit more efficient.
Definitely. All right. So Tyler, how do you get exposure to what's out there really? And is that just experience that you've used a variety of tools over the past, 10, 20 years and you know what's out there? Or can you talk us through that?
Yeah, I think it's really important now for people in operational teams,
Mm-hmm.
finance teams, marketing especially, to stay
Yeah.
on top of tech. We attend a lot of webinars. Even when I was a CFO in business, for 10 odd years, I would always be attending webinar on new technology.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually free. And in those
Yeah.
webinars, I can get really good customer insight. Usually there's one or two customers or past customers and they're like, I like this, but also this wasn't that good and it was really expensive. So,
Mm.
when I was CFO, I pushed myself and my team to attend as much as I could. We do a lot of Google research as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if a company's got like what I call an anchor system, they're like,
Yeah.
we are on QuickBooks, right? So we have to
Yeah.
be on QuickBooks. I'm like, okay, well, let's
Mm-hmm.
start with the QuickBooks app marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, on the
Mm.
QuickBooks app marketplace, here's the 5 expense systems that connect natively, or here's the 4 job systems that connect natively. And, here's what we think. However,
Yeah.
on the
Mm-hmm.
odd occasion, I might break an anchor as well. I'll be like, all right, I know you love this. However, if you move this, you're going to see an uptick of time efficiency by 90,000. So sometimes I might propose that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
love
sorry,
that.
to answer the question as well, we
Yeah.
do a lot of phone calls. Like we do,
Okay.
like we download a trial, we touch a system, we connect it
Yeah.
to any possible system. We download the app, we touch it, we play with it, and you can sniff test really quick good programming and bad
Mm.
programming. But yeah, I do a lot of like hands-on touching to try to find if it's actually a good system or not.
Yeah. And you were talking about some of those things, right? User experience is a big element. Pricing, you need to have that in mind. Reporting and things like that. So yeah, really, really cool.
And
Uh,
seamless, like how fast it goes. Like
yeah.
if you do a bill, is
Yeah.
it in the system at 8 a.m. tomorrow or is it in the system 5 seconds later?
No.
That's the one I
Yeah.
want to know.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really cool also, looking at those integrations that are native and also like what's available through kind of connector apps like Zapier and stuff like that. And do they have, I think an important requirement can also be, do they have an open API? So in the future, if you want to do a custom connection of some kind, that that's a possibility.
Absolutely. Like we do Power BI reporting as well, and like
Hmm.
systems that have open APIs, we pull a lot of data out of those and put them onto Power BI. There's two
Yeah.
wins. One is I love the visuals, like I love being able
Hmm.
to make a dashboard. And I
Yeah.
remember my old CEO at the design business would look at his dashboard at 5:30 every morning before the gym, and if it was wrong, I'd get like a 5:35 a.m. email, Tyler,
Mm.
update the leads dashboard. So it's good for data transparency. But
Yeah.
the second one is I found it surprisingly good for access. So if you've got like data that you have, if you're my head of sales for the Norwegian region or office, I might
Hmm.
just be able to give you a dashboard based on the Norway sales.
Yeah.
Whereas, you might, I don't want to give you access to the whole country or global system because you want to tell salespeople how well this is going, but maybe they don't need to see how much Timmy in Switzerland has billed last year.
Absolutely. So I think you and I are fans of these kind of systems that can bring more in a central place, a single source of truth. Do you find customers that have been using a lot of tools resistant to consolidation, or you don't really face that objection when you kind of go in with the clear reasoning?
We do sometimes, but it really comes down to how open they are to change and really being able to see the system. Sometimes
Yeah.
when someone's resistant to consolidating a system, sometimes they just need to see the system and touch it and use it to go, oh, actually, this is pretty seamless. Like
Mm.
it does work. And we can get wedded. Like people get wedded to a certain app or a certain product and we just end up loving it.
Yep.
But yeah, I always find sometimes you just need to show it instead of just using your words. Yes, it works. It'll be better. Show them so they can actually get a visual and understand and make their own decision.
Yeah. And what about that kind of fear of change? Because like bringing in any tool, there's a lot of apps that are very easy to onboard. You just download it or just create a login, and you get going with that really kind of niche thing. When you're talking about a system that's like underpins the way you run your business fundamentally, that can be a lot of work. How do you mitigate concerns around that?
Yeah, that change piece is really big. I I think that's where I've specialized in my like career for the last like 25 years is
Yeah.
around getting people comfortable with change and the why. It's really important to be able to say, to accept a no. All right, no, yeah, we don't want to change. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to be the end of the world if you stay on system A. It's okay, but as long as they
Yeah.
know the pros and cons of that, right? Hey, we might lose some staff because this system doesn't work, or it's going to take me 3 days a month to consolidate our sales report over 4 countries because we're using different systems.
Right.
So, I really try to explain the time cost of change and also the user experience. And
Mm-hmm.
every now and then, if I've got a CEO or a board member that is up to it, I'll actually ask them to come sit with me and process a timesheet or a bill so they can
Mm.
actually experience as well. And so when it comes to the change, I do a couple things like I really try to lay out in writing pros and cons
Yeah.
of the change, costing of the change, and then I
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of visualization. So here's what your system stack looks like versus
Yeah.
here's what it can look like at a later date. Because sometimes like I don't ever take for granted that I kind of see systems all integrating together like a spider web
Yeah.
where if you're talking to a board member who's making a decision on a system change,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that they understand and see what's in your head as much as needed for them to be comfortable for the decision.
Can you think of I'm sure you've got loads, but like a success story where consolidating these tools like really benefited the client's operations?
Yeah, without doubt. Like one of the consulting firms we're working on was a global consulting firm, with different systems across multiple continents. And we installed Scoro for that client, and that was probably our foundational tool. Um, and they were on different finance systems. They had multiple CRMs,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, not a lot talked. Like there was a lot of data being manipulated and managed between system to system, from CRM into jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
also in the HR system. It was
Yep.
hard to get data out of that to make sure head counts were exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And also what happened there is reporting was really hard. So
Right.
we just didn't have global visibility on you know job management, profit per client, profit per job, who was working on what, timesheet compliance. So
Yeah.
all the holes were plugged by people. So yeah, Scoro was our recommendation. It went through like complete board approval. We did like a full project plan. We scoped in Expensify, which was really cool because Expensify and Scoro natively connected. And then we also scoped in a finance product that connected with uh, Scoro. And globally now, like there's a single source of truth for jobs, for clients, for leads. They were pretty close to going with HubSpot for their leads, and I actually do like HubSpot, but this wasn't really a sales gen business where people would jump on the website and register interests, and there wasn't really significant BD people. So,
Yep.
the built-in CRM and quote system in Scoro worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
And it just removed a lot of like the global data visibility across the
Mm.
business. And then, especially for some of the European operators, the uptick in usability and user experience was just through the roof. Like
Mm.
they've never worked on a cloud-based operating system. They
Mm-hmm.
had never done a timesheet on their phone. They'd never been able to find a client's address on their phone. And those
Yep.
little things, you just can't take it for granted. And they're still in the early stages of use, but like I know long term it's going to be a really good product for them. And they're only going to get better month on, month out about how they use it. Capacity planning has started to come in to the equation now, and that's been really cool to see. So they're really pushing the boundaries of how intelligent their use of the system can be.
Yep. And you're picking up that positive sentiment amongst the team. Is that the
Yeah,
case?
like every system change has people that love it, people that are agnostic, and then people that, oh, I liked what this other system did better.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the sentiment's been really strong, especially
Mm-hmm.
from like the management side, because now they've got global visibility. Yeah, like there are some people that it's taken them time to get to it, but with the right training and the right discussions and assisting them setting up their jobs and showing them how easy it is to like you know track the capacity or assign someone to a job.
Yep.
The other one I loved was like showing a user how they could be in the taxi or Uber really and code an Uber to a job, and they
Mm.
were like, this is something that used to take like 6 weeks for me to get the whole process done. Now I just did it
Yeah.
in the 5 seconds. That's been such a cool, like those little wins you can't take for granted.
Amazing. So you're talking about some of the benefits. I read a claim on your LinkedIn profile, I think it was, saying I can cut 40% of the time cost out of most finance and payroll teams within 12 months. And with that 40% time saved, they can significantly reduce error rates and start to grow their true value. I just thought that was such a powerful statement. Is it true?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, like I've dropped that 40% number in mathematically into like some
Yep.
time and motion studies, but I've
Okay.
also, like inherently known it because, I've had teams of four that were working, 9 hours a day on churn manually. The design business I think about, we were a small team of four or five in the finance team, and we were manually churning out about 100 invoices a month manually using Excel and uploads. And then we dropped in a system. And, the first month we might have saved 10%. The second month we might have saved 20% on billing. Then the third month, I reckon we were half, you
Right.
know. And then we also dropped in a system like Zero. And, Zero sped up our bank recs. And then, I always just think about simplifying and automating and, you know, we dropped in Power BI for that business. So instead of reporting being a manually created task, it was on, as I mentioned before, it was on the CEO's phone every morning after being refreshed over midnight. And so, yeah, by really focusing on systems and processes, but then also like really having a focus on eradicating unnecessary tasks, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, the space is changing quite a lot, and like we've been saying, lots of new tools and tech out there. How do you see the space evolving in the next couple of years? Digital tools, automation, AI, all of that coming together. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm loving to see it. The technology, like the best in breed technology, is moving so fast. You know, in the job management space, everyone's really looking at making a good, intuitive user interface. Integrations are getting better, stronger, more reliable, easier to use, easier to set up. App
Hmm.
stores are going from 200 apps up to thousands of apps.
Mm,
And then the other one I'm loving to see is like the borderline of AI and automation. So, you know,
mm,
I've got a friend that works in insurance and he's got automatic invoicing that goes out for like 20,000 invoices a month.
right.
And I can't wait to see automatic invoicing for, mid-sized businesses. You're on a
Mm,
retainer, you got a $10,000, retainer thing if you're an agency or a consulting business. I can't wait to see that stuff go out without human touch. And AI is going to have a really interesting play in this as well, especially around data, like the data capture of client interactions, the way agencies, the way consulting businesses, the way design businesses manage their client data, I think is just going to be phenomenal, from invoicing to payments to marketing. There's some scary parts on it, but like I think it's moving really well, and I do like the way it's moving because it's moving to take away the low value tasks to allow us to do the work we really enjoy.
absolutely. It's super exciting, like you're saying. Tyler, that's been really, really interesting. So I just want to thank you again. But before we wrap up, where can people learn more about the Bean Counters and connect with you and your team?
Thanks, Harv. Yeah, our best place to find us is probably LinkedIn. I'm Tyler Caskey from TheBeanCounters on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
We're based here in Sydney, Australia. Our website is Australian website, so www.thebeancounters.com.au. Yeah, and we really like to help people change systems. And even if you just want to chat to talk about your systems, I actually really enjoy listening and learning sometimes. And even if it's a 15-minute chat, just to I can point you in the right direction for free, that's more than welcome. It happens quite often in my job.
Amazing, Tyler. Thank you so much. And one last question. It sounds like, some of the clients you work with do have an international presence. So you do work beyond just kind of clients that are in the local market. Is that correct?
Yeah, we definitely do. I'll be
Okay.
in Europe all European summer, which is actually lovely. But,
Okay.
we're doing a large system rollout in June, July, August. Yeah, we've done quite a few American clients and now we're really getting into Europe. But, our predominant base is Australia, but especially with our team member now in Lithuania, we're starting to approach that. And we're about to open a New Zealand office, which
Oh,
is
nice.
my home country. So that's happening later this year, which is pretty cool.
Amazing. Excellent. Tyler, thank you so much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hi, all. A few final thoughts from me as we wrap up this episode. The first is that a lot of times when we hear the word automation, and this applies to myself as well, our default is often to think about tools like Zapier, native integrations, or even custom API work that lets you interface multiple apps together. I mean, that is correct. But I wanted to underline that the kinds of systems that Tyler was talking about today as the base app that forms kind of the operating system to run your agency, those kinds of tools are called professional services automation tools or PSA tools. It's a hideous name and it doesn't roll off the tongue. But my point is that ironically, the kind of technologies that come to mind when we think of automation may not actually include the tools that actually have automation in their name. Why are these tools called professional services automation tools to begin with? Well, first, they're designed for professional services firms, anyone that sells their time, like agencies and consultancies. And second, they automate your workflow by allowing you to reuse the data you put in multiple ways. For example, the quotes with line items you create can be turned into projects. Those quotes can then be turned into invoices. The relevant line items can be turned into purchase orders for tracking supplier purchases. Those line items from your quote can be turned into tasks in the project for project management. And the same data on tasks can be used for scheduling and resourcing. Your team can timesheet in the same platform. You can track budgets in the same tool, and you can analyze your business metrics in the same tool as well without needing to export spreadsheets. Everything is done in one place. And like Tyler was saying, you can natively connect best in breed third party tools into these platforms, like Xero and QuickBooks or Sage for accounting. Or if your team has a really mature business development function, you could connect HubSpot or Salesforce CRM or the expenses or HR tool you use. All of that kind of stuff can plug in. So PSA tools differ from project management tools like Asana and Trello and others because they cover nearly the entire end-to-end project process, including creating budgets and invoices and reporting, not just project management. So how do you find a platform like this that does everything you need it to do? We mentioned some of that important functionality during the chat today, and we should probably turn this into a separate episode. But I would start with making a list of requirements. Consider things like whether you have multiple entities or just a single entity. Do you have multi-currency needs? Does it need to interface with important third-party tools that you use? Does it support creating quote templates to help your team build quotes consistently? Do you have requirements for retainer projects? What kind of reports do you want to see? Do timesheets have to be tracked manually or can they automatically be completed based on the schedule for the day? What's the user experience like? Is your team going to enjoy using this tool or are they going to be really frustrated because it's so clunky and dated? So I would create that list and then I would go and do my desk research, go to websites like G2, which help you find PSA platforms or other kinds of tools and see what other users are saying and set up a free demo or arrange a call so they can give you a product walkthrough. So that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please do rate the podcast and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please do share the episode with friends and colleagues that you think would benefit from hearing this conversation. Additionally, if you've got something you want to share with the ops community on this podcast, or there's someone you want us to speak to, or there's a topic you want us to cover, I would love to hear about it. Please connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a DM. My name again is Harv Nagra. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the next episode. This podcast is brought to you by Scoro, a platform designed for agencies and consultancies, which allows you to manage your projects, finances, and resources, all from one system. This is a platform I brought in at a previous workplace, which completely transformed the way we worked, and which I've recommended to clients of my own. You can sign up for a free trial on Scoro.com. That's Scoro.com. Or reach out to me, Harv Nagra, on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about some of my experiences.